At this point, I would like to request Brother Ray Suplido. I want to ask the first question because it's been in my mind since you delivered that excellent talk. So I fully agree with your three insights: lifelong learning, the the
Sharing.
need for greater inter-institutional sharing of resources, and also the challenge-based learning. Particularly for lifelong learning, I totally agree with the new approach that since our formal programs might not be relevant to the needs of the future of our current the job needs of our current students. But my question is, when it comes to innovative programs like this, um, we have to contend with mindsets, having especially in our country, where having a formal degree, a four-year degree, or matapos ng kolehiyo na merong degree, it's ingrained, deeply ingrained, not in institutions, among parents, even the students. So for higher education institutions, it seems many have still, for them it's still the gold standard. For parents especially, they might not understand if their children might want to go to this path. And employers, some employers still insist on a formal degree for their applicants. How do you My question is, how do you think we should approach changing these mindsets? Because we need to do this in order to make it acceptable. Not and the students have our children have grown up in this culture, in this environment. So how can we change the mindsets in the Philippine educational system?
Yeah, very good. Challenging question. It will take time, but the disruptions are already taking place. For example, the pandemic, look at the effect on malls, on big companies with BPOs. Although again, BPOs, the companies are looking for different persons with different competencies, and the competencies have changed. And then you have AI entering into the picture, and prophesied that AI will take over or make jobs that are really, you might say, clerical, useless, because robots will take care of that, or artificial intelligence. So that's why they, even in the talk earlier of the different occupations that are going to move out of the picture, accountants, secretaries, things that maybe
Yes,
librarians,
that's true.
they will be moved out because other forms are. So possibly what will happen is, when the students go home and the parents say, okay, where will you work? And then they say, well, what I studied for is not required anymore, or what they are requiring are different skills which unfortunately were not offered in the college or the university where I studied. And so they say, well, what I so I may have to go back and study another type of competency. So it may require time that also companies will make known in their different announcements that we are looking for employees with the following skills. If you don't have
Yes.
this, no need to apply. So again, it's going to be an educational. So that's why it's important, I think, for universities to work hand in hand with industry, with NGOs, with government, so that in order to find out what are the needs that are evolving, and so that's important, and then adapt to that, and then pass it on also to the parents and, of course, the students themselves.
Yes, thank you, Brother Ray. And this is totally aligned with what you mentioned in your talk that eventually alumni may probably become obsolete because the learning never stops and people tend to go back to school to learn more. The
Yeah.
learn, earn cycle. And it also is aligned with what President Concepcion said that we need to leverage our gains from, since you mentioned that in the pandemic, there have been changes in industry or in the requirements of like BPOs. And many of the Filipinos, many of the job seekers are getting jobs that because employers have been require they're not that strict. They don't have any need for degrees anymore. As long as you have the skills, they
Mm,
accept you. So I guess we really need to leverage our gains from the pandemic.
yeah.
We have another question, Brother Ray, and this has to do with inclusion and accessibility. So the question reads: considering the cost of higher education that you have mentioned, would inclusion and accessibility be features of University of the Future for private HEIs? And how do you think this will be implemented? I think the question is the one asking is referring to having a more um, accessible and inclusive education for those who have um, financial probably limitations, given that the costs have tripled, as you have mentioned. How do you think this could be implemented in the University of the Future that is in a private HEI?
Well, I'd like to see a future where there's no more private or public.
Oh,
In
that's
other words,
good.
in
Very good.
in other countries, the government takes care of higher education because higher education provides really the knowledge, the skills for the country to develop. And
Yes.
so it's an investment of the government to invest in developing university students and faculty who will be you might say, the source of or the engines for development of the country. And you look at Singapore. Singapore knows that we don't have resources except our human power. Therefore, if we develop our citizens and through good education, then we will produce products, services that will be demanded by other countries, and that will be our livelihood. So I'd like to see a future where there is a law right now where higher education is funded by government. And I think the private sector that pays taxes see it as part of the returns of the government in terms of service to these families in order that they can have access to education. So I'd like to see a future where you have a common application portal. You put in your information, and then it is processed. And then the government has a list of universities. What are their carrying capacities? What are their specializations and niches, etc.? And then they match, and that's so that could be one way. In the meantime, most private educational institutions rely on, I guess, what they are known for. So certain institutions stand out in terms of business courses, others in terms of engineering, others in terms of science or human social sciences. So that's the attraction portion that draws the students and of course the revenue from paying students. But perhaps in the future we would have you can choose any university or apply to any university, and it need not be called public or private. It's all higher education institutions.
Thank you, Brother Ray. Excellent answer po. Magdilang anghel po sana kayo. Sana po mangyari in our lifetime yung
Yeah.
ganung situation. I'd like to thank Brother Ray Suplido for joining us live in this afternoon session. Thank you po. Maraming salamat po, Brother Ray.